Men, I need you to have a father's heart. Mars Hill doesn't work if you don't have a father's heart. A father's heart for your own children. Saying, you know what? I don't need the police. I don't need the legal system. I don't need the judges to take care of my kids. I'll take care of that. And I need you men to have the father's heart, not only for your family, but our church family. The only way what we're doing succeeds is if the men have the father's heart. Usually in a church, it's primarily women and children, and they've already got the father's heart. What's missing is all the fathers. And one of the things that captivated me in Bible study in this past year is the fact that a father's heart is for the family and the church family. It's why we call Abraham our father in the faith. You see this fatherly language in Proverbs where he says, my son, my son, my son, listen to me, hear me. And he's teaching very practically. You see this as well with Paul, who says, Timothy's my son, and Titus is my son, and Onesimus is my son. They weren't his biological children, but they were his spiritual offspring. He says in 1 Corinthians 4:1, he says, you have many teachers, but you don't have many fathers. You can get a lot of podcasts, but hard to have a dad, a spiritual father to teach you and train you and help you. John is an old man. He writes 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John to the church, and he says, you're my dear children. Very fatherly language. In the early church, they would talk about the church fathers. The qualifications of an elder, 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, include the fact that he's a good father, because a lot of what you learn about spiritual leadership in the church is learned through parental leadership in the home. Raising your kids, you learn some stuff to spiritually invest in others, particularly those who didn't have fathers. And let me just say this. I know for a fact that Malachi ends perfectly because it's God's word and God's final word. And God's final word to the men is, you're very important. You're very needed. The Father is calling forth fathers. That the Father is calling forth fathers. And friends, what we're dealing with is an unfathered generation. Women have no idea what to look for in a man because they didn't have a man in their life who was worth anything. We're dealing with a bunch of young men who have no clue what it means to be a grown man, and so they take their cues from violence, they take their cues from pornography, they take their cues from advertising and marketing, and it's all foolishness, and it leads to generations of abortion and death and folly and rape and addiction and consumption, and the Father's heart is, no more. The answer is the Father's heart living in men, that they would have the Father's heart and that they would be fathers at home and they would be fathers at church and that they would father not only their children but their spiritual children and that they would father well so that they would leave a different legacy by the grace of God, a legacy that reflects the love and the affection and the investment of God the Father in them and through them. And so God's final word and God's answer is, more men with a father's heart. You, men, are very needed for what God is calling us to. You need to have the father's heart. What's going to happen to the women? What's going to happen to the children if you don't have the father's heart is devastating. And we've had enough of it. And by the grace of God, we need a new kind of man to create a new kind of legacy.